Hello, I'm Marcia Cavanaugh. Thanks so much for joining us. Well, surveys show that one of the biggest concerns facing Louisianians is maintaining insurance coverage. This week, the concerns intensified as another insurer pulled out of the state and as premiums continue to rise. Crime, of course, is always a concern. A local TV station began a crime series with a telling name, Wounded City. Elsewhere, the city attorney ruled that Mayor LaToya Cantrell should have to reimburse the city for extravagant flights, plus a watchdog group questioned the mayor's use of a city-owned apartment. And as recall efforts continue, the mayor defends her performance to date. We'll look at these stories as well as issues with the Sewerage and Water Board and adding two more names to our list of royals who have visited the city. Visiting us are tonight's Informed Sources, Errol Laborde, producer of Informed Sources; Michael Finch, investigative reporter, the Times-Picayune, the New Orleans Advocate; Mike Pearlstein, investigative reporter, WWL-TV Channel 4; and Matt Sledge, reporter, the Times-Picayune, the New Orleans Advocate. And we're going to stick with Matt right now because we're going to deal with the issues now confronting the mayor of the city of New Orleans, LaToya Cantrell. Let's talk now about reimbursement for first-class airfare.
Right. As you may remember, the mayor has been taking some political heat for all these first and business class trips she took over the last year or so. It's nearly $30,000, and there have been increasing calls for her to pay the city back. City council leaders are threatening to essentially dock her pay if she doesn't pay the city back. And there were a couple significant developments this week. One, earlier this week, the city attorney said that under her interpretation of the rules, the mayor is a city employee who's covered by a city policy that would require to make these reimbursements. And then just today, Friday, the mayor's chief administrative officer, essentially her top deputy, Gilbert Montano, said he was going to follow the city attorney's advice and enforce that policy upon the mayor, which would result in her paying back $29,000.
So basically what they say the city policy says is you can fly economy, fly coach, and you can bump yourself up to a business or first class, but you have to pay the difference. The mayor said she's not going to do that.
Yeah, the mayor's position has been very consistent throughout this entire debate. It's first, I'm not going to pay back. And then second of all, she's offered a number of different rationales for why she doesn't have to pay it back. One is that these have all been kind of economic development or tourism trips. And she's also said that she is concerned about her health, her mental health, and her safety if she flies coach. Obviously, that didn't hold water with some of the people who work for her, which is pretty interesting.
Yeah, and as you said, city council, they have said, no, we think she's got to pay back. And so they have said that they would perhaps dock her salary this amount if she continues to not pay.
They've threatened to dock her salary, which could create this interesting kind of legal question. The state constitution does not allow you to reduce an elected official's compensation during their elected term, so they were going to have to try and find some way around that. But with this latest statement today from Gilbert Montano that he's going to enforce his policy, it seems increasingly likely that the mayor might simply just pay the money back to the city, which would avoid this confrontation with the city council.
So the issue immediately at question regarding travel were some trips that the mayor took over the summer. Sort of refresh our memory about that.
Yeah, it was interesting. She took one trip to Europe in the first part of the summer, and there was a little bit of joking around on Twitter. And then she took a second. She went to both France and Switzerland this summer for sister city trips, and that's when people really started to have a problem with this. These trips came within this context of our incredibly high murder rate right now, and a myriad of other problems like road work, like the problems people have getting the trash picked up out in front of their streets. And people said, why are you jetting off to Europe to go sign these symbolic sister city agreements? You should be focused on the problems at hand.
Yeah, you can't have debate about how much economic development good these sister city trips actually do. I mean, can we expect a whole flux of people from this town in France to be coming to New Orleans? It seems like if anybody's helped, it would be more with the town in France with people from New Orleans going there. But I just doubt if they're real bonanza in terms of economic development.
You know, maybe it helps, maybe it hurts, but I think it's hard to say that it's going to help people get over these real immediate problems that are right in front of their faces. You know, the best argument for it is that maybe 5 or 10 years down the line, we have a slightly higher tourism numbers from France or something like that. That doesn't help people get the trash picked up out in front of their house on today. And that's what people are really concerned about right now.
All right, so I think there's going to, has council requested also that they take a look at other travel that the mayor has done previously?
Yeah, I think the council has asked the chief administrative officer to look into that. He's you know, they've also told the CAO to give them quarterly reports on the mayor's travel. So we'll essentially be getting information in real time about where the mayor is going
And how she's getting there.
Yeah.
Okay, one other thing now that's causing a real dust-up is the use of the apartment in the Pontalba that is designated for city use.
Yeah.
The mayor's use of it.
Yeah, this is a story that really blew up on Thursday with a nonprofit group, the Metropolitan Crime Commission, asking the city council to look into it. And essentially it seems as if the mayor has been spending a lot of time at the Upper Pontalba building right off of Jackson Square, this storied old historic building built by the Baroness Pontalba in 1850. And through this kind of quirk of history, the city owns the building and they also control a specific 2-bedroom residential apartment within the building. My understanding is this has typically been used to host official visitors from other cities or as a kind of venue for parties like Christmas caroling activities, but it seems like the mayor is spending a lot of time there, you know, hours a day in one TV station's accounting and occasional overnight time there. And this nonprofit group is arguing that this may be a misuse of city property and that the city council should look into it.
And so what problem could this cause the mayor? Because the mayor is not guaranteed a residence, right? When a person is elected mayor of the city of New Orleans, residence is not guaranteed there or included, right, in the salary.
You know, traditionally there's been no equivalent of Gracie Mansion or something like that, no equivalent of the governor's mansion in New Orleans. The mayor's folks have already come out and said, hey, this doesn't violate any policies. And as of now, at least, I'm not aware of any specific policies that it's violated. You know, maybe someone will point to one that it does violate. But I think at the very least, there's kind of an appearance issue. You know, this question of even if it doesn't violate a specific policy of whether the mayor should be using the city property in this way.
Well, the mayor also says, well, other mayors have used it. Have other mayors used it this way?
You know, I actually spoke with one former mayor this morning, and he said he had never spent a night there, and that he had actually only been there a few times during his term. That was Sidney Barthélemy. And you know, his understanding was that it was mostly a place to host these ceremonial events, not a residence for the mayor.
All right, we'll see how this turns out. Thanks a lot,
Thanks.
Matt. Okay, over to Mike Pearlstein right now. And WWL has had a special program looking at crime in the city called, and your series is called, well, it was a special program, and then there also, you could see different reports online called Wounded City. So what are you all finding out?
Well, first of all, it comes at a time when New Orleans is once again getting that label as the murder capital of the United States. Our depleted police force has been the subject of many, many stories. It is at a historic all-time low of under 1,000 officers. And with all of those things top of mind for so many people, we decided to do a deep dive into all of the issues and with a look toward possible solutions. And for me, it was perhaps a little bit of deja vu, or maybe better termed it as a recurring nightmare, because you know, I've covered criminal justice going back to the 90s when we got all that kind of bad national publicity for high crime, corrupt cops, and it was enough to sound the alarms and bring in consultants and an out-of-state police chief, Richard Pennington from Washington, D.C., and we sort of see the same thing being replicated again in an appearance that we are in a crisis. Now, the timing turned out to be somewhat fortuitous. We started working on this series and trying to intelligently do something in depth that not just showed the immediate problem of the overnight murder, but the long-range impact on families, on the community, and most importantly, looking at what has worked in other cities and what has actually worked here in New Orleans. And sure enough, in the midst of putting this together, quite an ambitious project involving many of our staff and producer Nicole Wavers, we have the police department reaching out and hiring not just consultants from New York, one of the former New York police commander Fausto Pichardo, but John Linder, sort of a management guru, who was the architect of the reforms back in the 90s when Richard Pennington came up with the Pennington Plan and promised to reduce murder by 50% and actually pulled it off. One thing that is probably the most important thing that was accomplished in the 90s was building up the police department from at that time around 1,300 to 1,600 officers, and that 1,600 number has kind of stuck as the optimal strength of the department. We're so far below that, we're actually at around 950. And so the consultants are back in town under John Linder, looking at pulling out all of the stops, and we've seen some pretty immediate action taken, starting with boosting up those frontline patrols by taking district investigators as well as some ranking officers from desk jobs and putting them on the street, responding to 911 calls, and most importantly, kind of increasing the police presence on the street. It does appear that with so many carjackings and armed robberies crisscrossing the city, going from district to district, that the presence is just not enough to suppress rather brazen acts of violence, and the carjackings, as we've reported many times, led by juvenile offenders, particularly hard to tackle from the prosecution end of that. Juvenile court and juvenile detention is not meant for really long-range prison sentences. So many issues are tied into A, the immediate solution of cracking down on crime, boosting the police department, but B, addressing the social ills that lead to criminal activity in the first place. And all of those are, big and deep topics. As I pointed out in the series, if there was a single best solution, every city would use it, of course. But times change, the nature of criminal activity changes, and we did speak to several former, police chiefs, Eddie Compass, Ronald Surpass, who are still in town, and looked at how their plans, when they were chiefs, could be, I guess, altered to today's times to be effective, along with the also important social programs to really just knock down the amount of crime in the first place, understanding that police are reactive. They respond when crimes happen. We as a city have to figure out how to, prevent crimes from happening in the first place.
Mike, does the city have the money to pay for these extra positions, even if they get them?
Absolutely. The budget has, the police department has never filled its manpower budget going on at least the full length of LaToya Cantrell's term, and we keep going, further and further below. So there's a lot of additional money. Now, it's used in certain ways to give more overtime to the existing officers who are just stretched very, very thin. Those officers have been on 12-hour shifts for some time, just as a way to, maximize the coverage and responding to calls. But even that's not cutting it, with some people waiting, hour or hours, plural, to get a police to come and respond to a 911 call.
A real problem with that. Mike, I have to jump in here. Are you guys going to be continuing this series, Wounded City?
Well, clearly the problem's not going away,
No.
and neither is our coverage. You will see many more stories under that title of Wounded City, which is certainly an apt description of where we are now. But
Right.
look for more stories on the possible solution, what's being done to patch up the wound.
Okay. All right, Mike. Thanks a lot. Okay. Going over to Mike Finch right now. And Mike, you took a look at what's happening with, a real crisis now for getting homeowners insurance here in the state of Louisiana.
Yes, it's really, a crisis that's been several years in the making in a lot of ways. What we're seeing coming to bear on a lot of consumers is, policies from several years ago that, state lawmakers and political leaders undertook in terms of attracting what they call small regional insurance companies to Louisiana to fill the void left by mainstream insurers who, largely pulled out after Hurricanes Katrina and Rita. Many of those firms, who've been here since 2008 or maybe later, are now failing in going insolvent. Some are pulling out from the state. Sending a lot of policyholders to Louisiana Citizens, the state insurer of last resort, where coverage is mandated to be 10% higher than the market in a parish. So they're feeling a lot of financial pain, and we're hearing a lot of that from people individually. You see it come to bear. You hear from lawmakers as well who are hearing from their own constituents complaining about it. It really is a widespread issue that stretches along the southern part of the state, especially
Right.
below interstates 10 and 12.
Yeah, particularly since, we've had over the past 3 years some really bad hurricanes hit South Louisiana. So I think we now have 9 insurance companies that have been insolvent, and then several more that have just pulled out saying, I'm not insuring here anymore. Well, what's to be done? There's been a request by Louisiana Citizens for, a 63% premium hike?
Yes, Louisiana Citizens, they cite the state law that requires their rates to be 10% higher than the market, and they sought a 63% premium hike. I don't know how that will hit every individual because it's usually an aggregated average of some kind. So I don't know how it will touch everybody individually, but that's still a pretty big number. Wherever
really
you
is.
fit on the spectrum of that, you'll still feel some financial pain, and many people were already complaining about the cost of Louisiana Citizens. It doesn't really seem like there's much relief in sight because there was an insurer that was declared insolvent this week. So sending possibly more people to Louisiana Citizens.
Yeah, to Louisiana Citizens, which is the largest provider now, as I understand, with over 100,000 policies.
I don't know if it's the largest. It may be State Farm may still
be
be
bigger?
the largest. State Farm still has a pretty large presence here. They, I think, hold maybe 25% of the market still.
All right.
I don't think Louisiana Citizens has quite hit that mark yet.
So our insurance commissioner, Donald, what is he trying to do to get more private insurers to come in?
Well, one of his main initiatives as of late is an incentive program that he wants to recreate. This is a Katrina-era incentive program that he used after those two storms. Back in 2008, he was able to attract, I want to say it was 5 insurance companies to write policies here in Louisiana, and in exchange, they received millions of dollars to do it. They agreed to take policies directly out of citizens in some cases. And when you think about what Louisiana Citizens really is, it's the combination of 2 high-risk pools. So these are very, very risky policies for any insurer to take on, which is why State Farm, Allstate, aren't as interested in taking them. So for any insurer to take them on, it's a significant challenge. So the state feels that providing them some kind of incentive is going to take some pressure off of Louisiana Citizens in case there is some kind of catastrophic failure where the state insurer runs out of money, which happened before.
And then we have to see what the big hurricane in Florida is going to do, too, to insurance rates, because some of these insurance companies are based in Florida.
Absolutely, absolutely. That's definitely a concern. There's some, my saying is that whenever Florida sneezes, Louisiana could catch a cold. It's sort of the way I think about it. There's a lot of overlap between the insurers. There's what Donnellan calls small regional insurers, which means they largely write in Florida, Louisiana, Texas, and some go as far as South Carolina. So any storm that could touch one of those states could be, could be problematic for them. There's one company in particular that I'm interested in. I don't know how they fared after Hurricane Ian. That's SafePoint. Donnellan, SafePoint assumed a fair number of Louisiana's policies from the first 3 failed insurers, and that saved the state a lot of time in terms of delaying pressure on Louisiana citizens, but I don't know how well or how fair they're doing these days.
Okay. Well, I guess we will just wait and see, but it is a problem that we've got to confront. Okay, thanks a lot, Mike. And Matt, we're going to go over to you kind of quickly because IG, Inspector General in New Orleans, said, look, you got bumpy, terrible streets out there. Don't blame it all on the city. Sewerage and Water Board has some share in that blame.
Yeah, there's been a lot of attention paid to the Department of Public Works and kind of City Hall's management of these roadwork projects all around the city, some of which are excruciatingly slow, as any New Orleanian knows. And this week, the Inspector General, Ed Michel, came out with a report that says, hey, let's not forget about the Sewerage and Water Board, because many of these projects are funded by $2 billion from FEMA, tied to Hurricane Katrina reconstruction, that are for both road and water and sewer line reconstruction. So DPW has to coordinate with the Sewerage and Water Board, and that coordination has been spotty sometimes. So the report said, don't forget about the Sewerage and Water Board. They've had their own problems.
And including just an outdated, database, really. Their IT is kind of old.
Yeah, it's called an asset management database, and it kind of tracks, where their pipes are and what kind of pipes they have. And it's from 1991, so this is like before Windows, I think, even. And the software developer last supported this software in 2005. So we're now 17 years after that. And then going back to 2015, the Sewerage and Water Board has admitted that it needs new software, a new database, and just hasn't actually gotten it yet.
Well, anytime soon, we hope? Do we know?
They say they're working on it.
Okay.
They say that this year they essentially hired somebody to kind of prepare the contract.
Okay, all right. Thanks a lot, Matt. Okay, E, we're going to wrap up with you because you want to add on to the list of royals who have visited.
Yeah, well, last week in the wake of the royal funeral, we were talking about royal visits to New Orleans, going back to the Grand Duke Alexis and onward. And the question came up, well, how about Charles and Camilla? And they did come to New Orleans. I think a lot of people don't remember that. They were only here for 2 hours, and that was in November of 2005, after Katrina. They were in the United States for a week. They started off in Washington, and they were going to go to San Francisco, but they kind of wedged this in, and they came and they inspected the lower Ninth, areas that were hit hard. And then also they went to the French Quarter, and they visited the school. I think this shot was probably taken at what was the Cathedral School, which existed at the time. That was the then Bishop, Alfred Hughes. And one of the things that enriched Charles while he was here, if you notice, they gave him some Mardi Gras beads, which he has around his neck, which would go great with a crown one day. But
That's right. Maybe we'll see him at his coronation. Huh?
Maybe so. But one woman praised him. I don't know if any economic benefit came, but one woman pointed out something which is true because they attract a lot of media. And this is at a time when New Orleans was still looking for media attention. And she was saying, I hope that you all coming here attracted the interest of the congressmen from the north and from the west to come here and see what happened. One of the things, just the person though, on Camilla, she and Charles had just gotten married that April, so she was still a little bit being like the other woman in the whole Diana thing, but this American trip really gave her a chance to establish herself and her own identity. So essentially it was Camilla's coming out too.
A very dear friend of mine, Sandy Shillstone, at the time was the head of the New Orleans Tourism and Marketing Corporation. It was with a group from the city that helped the then Prince Charles and his wife Camilla tour the French Quarter, and she said they were both very, very charming, very, very kind. She said that Prince Charles indeed was a very, very handsome, nice-looking person, and that Camilla was very, very sweet. But she was really touched because he looked at her and he said, "And what about you? How was your family? How did you do?" And she just was really impressed with the fact that he was just a very nice man.
If you read the press accounts, the Associated Press did a lot of coverage on this. When they were in Washington, they saw the TV coverage, and they were just really, really touched by it. And that may have been part of what motivated them. And then there's a description when they got to the lower ninth, and they went and they stood on the bridge and they saw the damage. And both of them were just shaking their heads in disbelief. Right. And so they were, England doesn't get hurricanes. It gets everything else, including world wars, but it doesn't get hurricanes. And so it was probably a good thing for them to see and to experience.
Okay. All right, E, we're going to stick with you now for other stories.
Okay, while we're talking about things of European origin, the opera season starts this weekend. We in New Orleans are really blessed to have a good performing opera. Barbara Seville, it starts this weekend. They perform on Friday and Sunday, and you're probably saying, well, I can't go on Sunday because of the Saints. No, because the Saints play at 8:30 Sunday morning.
That's right,
So
because they're in London.
In England, by the way, yeah. And so you can watch the Saints Sunday morning and still have a chance to go at 2:30 see Barbara Seville.
All righty. Mike Pearlstein, over to you.
Okay, so in the sports world, I get it. The Saints fans and the faithful are disappointed by the 1 and 2 start and some controversy at quarterback and what have you. But on the other Major League sports team, the Pelicans, they started their practices this week. They had the media day, which is always full of hope and optimism. But they really kind of opened their doors to the public Saturday, 2 o'clock at Smoothie King Arena with an open practice. And that's ahead of their season opener starting on October 19th. First home game, October 23rd. And there are not just high hopes, but a healthy Zion Williamson, which could be a difference maker and turn the Pelicans, everybody here hopes, into a contender.
We hope so. Mike Finch. Over to you for other stories that are happening.
Oh, well, of course, there's the hurricane in Florida, Hurricane Ian. I'm actually a Florida native, and people down there continue to try and recover. It's going to be a long recovery for them. I'll be looking forward to seeing, what potential spillover effects are pertinent to Louisiana in the next week.
Okay. Matt, real quick.
Will she pay it back? The mayor still has not said affirmatively one way or the other whether she'll pay back these first and business class flights.
Okay, we shall see. Thank you guys for being here. Thank you all for joining us, and we'll see you again next week for Informed Sources. Have a good evening.